It is now official. CNN projects that Donald Trump has been elected president, defeating Vice President Kamala Harris and making a political comeback unlike any in modern American politics.
This is a magnificent victory for the American people that will allow us to make America great again.
So, Donald Trump is the next president of the United States, and honestly, as a lifelong Democrat turned independent this cycle, I'm not at all surprised by this outcome. If you watching or listening to this are surprised, stick around. I have some informative and sexy things to say about all of this. Up until October 2023, I considered myself a Democrat. I was definitely more progressive than most Democrats I know, but I still always voted blue up and down the ballot because that's what I thought the well-educated gays and minorities did. But clearly, this shit ain't gonna cut it anymore. I mean, hell, look at California. I lived in Los Angeles for 5 years prior to moving to Atlanta. Unsurprisingly, this election cycle, the largest always blue state, codified marriage equality into the state constitution. Woo. What shocked me is that simultaneously, California residents voted against increasing the minimum wage, against rent control, and I can't believe I'm even saying this, but voted to allow slavery and involuntary servitude. The fact that the last one even exists in this country is a precursor to the conversation that you and I are about to have. I'll get way deeper into this in a few minutes, but prior to the final poll results between Kamala and Donald, every liberal on social media was pre-blaming Jill Stein and her voters for taking votes away from Kamala. If you look closely at each swing state, the votes Jill received don't come close to adding up to a Kamala win if Jill weren't in the picture. If you're listening to this and you still hate Jill Stein, or you're disappointed in me for voting for her, maybe you feel shame or confusion, look, I get it. But please give this episode your time. I hope the quantitative proof empowers you to redirect your conjectured rage toward the actual person who took votes away from Kamala herself. I also hope this video empowers you to help your communities make new decisions in how we approach the liberation you think Kamala would have given you. Because real talk, I promise you, even if Kamala had won, you still would not be free of the hamster wheel that we're all living in. Before I begin, just a heads up, if you come into my comments with ignorant or hateful rhetoric, you will be blocked and banned from my channel. Some of what I'm sharing in this video is deeply personal and traumatic. It involves family and religion. So this space is for sharing knowledge and love, period. Let's dive in. If you know me personally, you know exactly what I'm gonna say is the reason that Kamala lost. But it's definitely more nuanced. Here are my 5 hypotheses of why Kamala couldn't pull off what would have been a historic win. First, misogyny and racism. I recently watched Megan Thee Stallion's documentary. As she endured the mental anguish of being shot by someone who was supposed to be her friend, thousands, if not millions of people hopped on social media to condemn her, call her a liar, even go as far to say shit like Tory Lanez should have finished the job. Obviously, people on the internet don't know anything about anything and post things for attention and clout all the time. But the pain of feeling like the world is against you for telling the truth is scary. Most of her loudest critics were men, straight and gay, who used her personality, questionable demeanor during interviews post-shooting, which admittedly was off, but how could it not be? And weaponized her sexuality against her. The documentary highlighted comments such as, "You deserved it. You did this to yourself. Stop lying." This is all inherently vile and is upheld by white supremacist ideologies like Christianity, which teach women to remain modest and do what men tell them to do. Megan is antithetical to these beliefs, which makes men rooted to patriarchy uncomfortable. Kamala wasn't exactly whopping her way through this election, but commentary about her paints a very clear picture. Former Fox News commentator Megyn Kelly tweeted that Kamala actually did sleep her way into and upwards into California politics, without any justification, by the way. During a Fox Business News segment, right-wing podcaster Alec Lace said Kamala was the original Hawk Tuah girl, insinuating it was Kamala sucking not her experience, that elevated her into politics.
And there's the DEI press secretary telling you that the DEI vice president is the future of the party here. And so the future looks kind of dim for the Democrats here, but this is no shocker either. Kamala Harris, she's the original Hawk Tuah girl. That's the way she got where she is. And the party's going downhill if it's in her hands.
That was tough. That was harsh.
Misogyny is often intermingled with racism, like when Trump questioned Kamala's racial identity. Remember when Obama ran for president and Republicans challenged his qualifications to run run because they didn't believe he was actually born in Hawaii. Of all the other presidents of this country, who, if you need a reminder, are all straight white men, not a single one was ever questioned about whether they were qualified for the job of president. None of them were accused of fucking their way to get where they are. It's ironic that in 2021, Kamala herself said, "This is not a racist country." Meanwhile, it's this country's hatred of women and fear of ethnic minorities that cost her millions of votes. Before I move on to the next point, I do want to mention that a lot of people on Twitter are suggesting Kamala's loss has nothing to do with racism or misogyny. Ashley Stevens writes, "I'm gonna say the hard thing. Kamala Harris did not lose the election because of racism and misogyny. That was a negligible reason at best. Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, and Summer Lee all won their seats in swing states that VP Harris lost. Sit with the real reasons why she lost." I'm going to let listeners and viewers ruminate on that comment. Tell me how you feel in the comments below. Second, propaganda. I really underestimated the power of Alt-Right Bros podcast. It was easy for me to see a clip of Joe Rogan or Aiden Ross and think, God, these guys are morons. They don't present factual evidence ever, just conjecture and loose ideas with no factual evidence. However, Joe Rogan's podcast, which has shared unfactual information in platforms so-called free thinkers who don't have accredited expertise in their talking point, has been the most streamed podcast in the United States for 3 years straight. I was also gagged to learn Joe's podcast is sponsored by the game Call of Duty, which of course it is. White people who sit in front of their PlayStation and call each other the N-word all day love that game. Dana White, president of UFC, you know, the boxing franchise, gave a speech after Trump won, personally thanking Joe Rogan, Aiden Ross, and Theo James, all white, right-wing podcasters, for helping Republicans win this election. Meanwhile, over the years, Joe Rogan has told his 16 million followers misinformation such as vaccines change your DNA. And the propaganda is even worse on Twitter. Since Elon's acquisition in 2022, there was a dramatic increase in the amount of right-wing posts in my feed. In fact, over 90% of the ads I'm presented with are Save America, Vote Donald Trump ads from Trump himself and Elon, which is crazy because I blocked both of them years ago on Twitter. It's no surprise that Elon recently changed Twitter's behavior, by the way, to still present someone's tweets even if you block them. Imagine how people who block their abusers feel about that. Elon even went as far as using the @America handle, which you'd think would be like a neutral account used for news in this country or something, to instead heavily promote Trump as the savior of democracy. Look, the last thing I'll say about propaganda, I lived in Los Angeles during the start of the COVID pandemic. I was happy to mask and get vaccinated, and all my friends were too. But religious leaders and alt-right bros started pushing the idea that vaccines cause autism or insert a chip inside your body, which, if you're familiar with the Bible, would be considered the mark of the beast, which effectively is a denouncement of white Jesus. Can't have that. I respect someone's spirituality, but I can also identify that these suggestions are not in any way rooted in tangible truth or reality. All of this propaganda has fueled the third reason Kamala lost, which I'm combining into 2 talking points: religion and education. My sister texted me this morning saying she hung up on my mom after an argument over the results of this election. My mother voted for Trump in 2016, unapologetically, and she early voted for him again this election cycle. My own mom called me today to talk about her freshly diagnosed cataracts, unrelated, but she brought up the convo with my sister about Trump. The conversation that started between me and my mom as calm and civil ended with me telling her for the umpteenth time all the things the rest of us already know about Trump. He's racist, misogynistic, sexually assaulted a number of women, has ties to Jeffrey Epstein, conned people and businesses out of money for years. You remember Trump University? It's one thing for me to think millions of Republican voters just don't care about any of that stuff, which of course is already completely true and up. But my mom, who is on government assistance and lives on Facebook and Truth Social from her apartment in Indiana, takes it a step further. My mother has retweeted and shared QAnon theories about this country's elite and how Democrats and celebrities are pedophiles. She also revealed on the phone today that she thinks it's unfair illegal immigrants, quote unquote, get $15,000 in food stamps a year, which is more than her.
That's not true.
By the way, I checked this as the USDA government website states undocumented non-citizens are not and have never been eligible for SNAP food stamp benefits. My mom has also allegedly seen video of illegal immigrants, quote, giving the finger to America and getting arrested for raping U.S. citizens. While it's not unheard of for an undocumented or any person to do these terrible things, I shared with my mom an alternative thought. So, just to preface, I follow an account on Twitter whose sole purpose is to identify police officers and religious figures convicted of sexually assaulting and trafficking minors and children. This account posts multiple convictions daily with evidence. While I can't prove an account doesn't exist for the alleged undocumented persons committing illegal acts that my mom speaks of, the National Institute of Justice shows that undocumented persons commit more than 50% less crime than U.S. citizens. So I posed this question to my mom, who, as my sister reminded me, has put toxic pastors and abusers, men, on a pedestal since we were kids due to her own trauma and self-hatred. I said, Mom, what does it say about you and other Trump voters like you that you're willing to seek out an over-exaggeration of illegal immigrant, quote-unquote, crime and vote accordingly when police, pastors, and now our president commit more sexual assault and crime than the, quote, brown people coming here illegally that your internet bubbles are telling you about? By the way, my mom is white with black biracial children, just an FYI. You know what she said? She doesn't believe the accusations against Trump, all of the sexual assault and charges, because they're essentially coming from the dictator Democrat pedophiles with no evidence or proof other than what she knows spiritually. I know. But listen, many small town red state Christians just like her believe Trump's history as a businessman, not a politician, will save democracy. Trump will either stop the apocalypse from happening or be able to protect Christians during the upcoming apocalypse. How can I expect to educate her and those who think like her, who are so deep in their delusion they think God has told them Trump is the savior of this country? You can't. It's literally impossible. And I want to say quickly, I'm not here to bash my mother. Trust me, I've let her have it on the phone today, and I've always let her have it in these situations. But engaging with somebody who birthed you and taught you to love people unconditionally and be kind, and to be frank in person, she very much reflects those same beliefs. It's kind of a mental mind for me. The fourth reason Kamala lost: blue MAGA, empty promises, and Democrat delusion. Look, red MAGA succeeds in their efforts because they're all aligned on the same two things: fear and white supremacy. They go together like Oreos and milk. The alt-right, or I suppose now the mainstream right, the platform is everyone who isn't white and heterosexual is coming to erase you. Even though that is complete nonsense, Republicans are consistent with their messaging and have been over the last decade. They are relentlessly firm. Trans people and immigrants are dangerous. Guns are awesome. And women are tools for men to cook and have babies. Meanwhile, Kamala once said she hates fracking, then recently said she supports it. In one recent campaign ad, she told Michigan voters she stands with Palestinians in ending the bombardment against them by Israel. But then in another ad for Pennsylvania, she said for the 100th time, she supports Israel's right to relentlessly bomb Palestinians in the name of freedom. I'm gonna get to all of that here in a second. Democrat politicians have been selling a story of human rights, common sense economic reform to help struggling people, and good vibes, while completely ignoring socialist and green candidates who want to reallocate the money the US spends on war and police to universal healthcare and infrastructure. Democrats are doing all of this while also actively giving Republicans a seat at the table who oppose all of these progressive policies. My Instagram feed for the last 3 weeks consists of people I follow who haven't said a word about mutual aid, liberation, community, or Palestine, and they're all of a sudden pro-voting for Kamala as the only way to protect our democracy. For weeks, I've been bashed online and lost followers and friends, mind you, just for voting for Jill Stein. You're wasting your vote. A vote for Jill is a vote for Trump. You're an idiot. Let the record show, Kamala lost all of her swing states. And in only 2 of them, Wisconsin and Michigan, the number of votes for Jill Stein plus the other third-party candidates, not even just Jill's alone, but like all of the not Democrat or Republican votes. Technically, they could have potentially saved Harris in those 2 swing states, but even if Harris had won those votes in those 2 swing states, her total electoral votes would still be sitting at 251, which is still a loss. In other words, it was not third-party voters' fault Kamala lost. That was always abundantly clear to me, but now there's quantitative proof, which we love. Finally, and the reason you were waiting for from me, Israel and the U.S. genocide against Palestinians. We've given billions of dollars to Israel to massacre innocent people in the name of self-defense, quote unquote. I'm not going to spend hours explaining this or attempting to convince you of the reality that Israel is in an apartheid state whose existence right now is solely built upon displacing native people. Sounds familiar, huh? But whether any of you watching agree with this or not, supporting this massacre unequivocally and unwaveringly, as Kamala repeatedly has told us, is wildly unpopular in this country. An astounding 67% of all US voters, 77% of Democrats, and 56% of Republicans do not support our government greenlighting Israel committing this Holocaust with our money and weapons. Those of us who haven't muted the bloodshed on social media the last 14 months have seen tens of thousands of Palestinians murdered for no reason. While the number has seemingly frozen at 42,000 for months now, which I know is inaccurate considering I see reports every single day of at least 100 new dead Palestinians, one study suggests it's likely 200,000 or more dead when you consider not just direct military bombardment, but also famine and disease. This 67% of US voters who oppose US support of this have been protesting, begging, sharing, getting arrested, losing our jobs and livelihood, all for expressing that killing innocent people is wrong. Meanwhile, politicians on both sides, Kamala included, have shared debunked talking points about Hamas sexually assaulting women and beheading babies, all of which have been debunked. Use the internet, y'all. There are countless videos online of Zionists also expressing that every single Palestinian, men, women, even unborn babies, deserve this because they are terrorist dogs.
في كمان واحد اسمه صالح القرآن راسه كله طلع مخه طلع راح دفوت للرقاد والله ما هي حياة ولا عيشة.
Many blue MAGA voters are emphasizing Trump will likely be worse on Gaza than Biden and Kamala, and yes, that may be true. But Kamala is a part of the administration doing it now, right now. I think if Kamala had taken a bold stand against the Zionist lobby AIPAC and denounced this terrible Holocaust, there's a good chance she would have won this election. But that would not be in her best interest. The online dark money tracker called AIPAC Tracker estimates Kamala has received over $5 million just from this PAC alone to endorse Israeli policies. Trump may be openly racist against Black and Latino folks, but you really have to ask yourself how Joe and Kamala, in their unwavering support of a white ethno-state murdering Arabs, are much different than him in that regard. An old friend of mine living in Chicago posted this very personal note on his Instagram story today. You cannot keep bringing up the pervasive racism of Trump voters without also bringing up the gleeful, genocidal, anti-Arab racism of the Harris campaign and their voters. If you manage to ignore it to excavate something redeemable in her, you should be able to understand that many who voted for Trump could just as easily do the same for him. In the end, racist or not, nearly 99% of people voted for an openly racist candidate. That is an inarguable fact. I felt this statement deep in my soul, y'all. CNN aired a segment today comparing the total amount of Kamala's votes compared to Biden in 2020. Kamala did not surpass Biden's popular vote, get this, in a single county in this entire country. Here's the clip.
So you asked, are there any places that the vice president is overperforming Joe Biden in 2020? So we could show you that as well. We just bring that out here. Harris overperforming in 2020.
Holy smokes.
There you go. So let this go away and see if there's anything on the east side there.
Literally nothing?
Literally nothing.
Literally not one county?
Like, this is so insane and embarrassing, and honestly, it's a testament to everything that I've mentioned in this video podcast. I lastly want to point out the number of non-voters this cycle compared to 2020. It's also insane and embarrassing. In 2020, in that election, Trump received just over 74 million popular votes. Joe Biden received just over 81 million votes. This cycle, this current one between Harris and Trump so far has received 72 million votes, which is roughly 2 million less than last time. But Harris, compared to Biden's 81 million, she only received 67 million votes. In other words, 14 million Democrats completely disappeared from this race. I can't assume the exact reasons all of these voters didn't vote this time. I'm hoping some news outlets with much more budget than I can compile that specific data on a larger scale. But to lose the appeal of 14 million Democrat voters while Trump more or less maintains his base has to have them scratching their heads. They should probably watch this video. Bernie Sanders, who once ran on a green socialist ticket and ended up promoting his support for Harris, despite condemning her decisions on Israel, today posted a statement tonight on Instagram that said, "It should come as no great surprise that a Democratic Party which has abandoned working class people would find that the working class has abandoned them." He goes on to say, "Well, the big money interests and well-paid consultants," he won't say AIPAC, but that's what he's talking about, "who control the Democratic Party, learn any real lessons from this disastrous campaign?"
I think the fuck not.
I concur. Now you're probably wondering, okay, Jenks, now that we're here, what the are we supposed to do about all this? Election day and all this vitriol is in the past. How do we move forward? Amanda Seales refers to herself as a common sense specialist, so I'm going to co-opt that title for these last 60 seconds. A lot of folks on social media with seemingly more expertise on social, political, and geographical history than me are talking a lot about building local communities, mutual aid, talking to your neighbors, protesting, etc. And I agree with all of that, and I hope to learn more and have guests on who can help me dive deeper into all of this stuff. But to me, right now, the easiest way to liberate yourself from the inevitable hellscape we're about to endure is this. Stop being a fake ass, talking out both sides of your neck ass bitch. And that message, by the way, is to politicians. Like, first of all, Bernie Sanders. Behind the scenes, were you telling Kamala and the rest of the Dems that their campaign was garbage? You publicly supported Kamala during her campaign, and now you're dragging her and the Dems under the bus, which is justified. But this is your party. This is the party who sabotaged you when you tried running for president. Whatever strategy you think you have right now makes you look really wishy-washy, which, as I mentioned earlier, does not win elections. For the rest of you non-politicians who are watching and listening to this, I need you to stop being complicit in every aspect of your life when it comes to your community. For example, I've experienced racial and gender discrimination at the two very well-known and economically successful companies at which I worked after college. Colleagues I've worked with for 8 years at my current job, the one I have now, knew about the micro and macro aggressions and discrimination that I endure at the hands of elitist white managers, which, by the way, severely impacted my mental and physical health, like severely, and my financial livelihood recently. But not a single one of these colleagues came to my defense or spoke up for me, despite 8 years of working together, my own impeccable work ethic, and partnership with them on work-related and sometimes not work-related stuff. If you see someone pulled over by police, for example, if you can safely pull over and record, make sure the driver is okay, do so. You can find innovative ways to safely engage your neighbors. Hell, you can create engagement surveys or plans in a spreadsheet or a Telegram channel, attach it to a QR code, and then like print out and put those QR codes on your neighbor's doors if you're shy and maybe you're not ready to engage strangers face to face. You can become a local politician. The easiest thing for me is follow and share your artist friends' work and pay more attention to that than you do Beyonce's Halloween costume. You can start really small or as big as you want, but you need to be ready to shift your brain and put in the work. Hell, I might go as far to suggest stepping off the hamster wheel, put your middle finger up to the American dream, quote unquote, of working until you die, quit your job, and upgrade your happiness beyond material possessions. Or you can keep working to death, paying taxes to fund genocide, bratting, coconutting, and waving your fingers at third-party voters. But seriously, the bottom-up change we need to rebuild the fabric of this country, it will not come from celebrities or influencers or voting blue no matter who. It comes from you. What's your plan? I'll be waiting.